In the summer of 1986, a family of 4 vanished while fishing along the muddy banks of the Stillwater River. For 5 years, not a single clue surfaced. Then, in the summer of 1991, a local fisherman gutted a record-breaking catfish and pulled out to gold wedding rings and a tiny pink hair clip from its belly. The names engraved on those rings matched the missing Bennett family, turning a long cold case into a town-wide obsession overnight. From the moment the news hit, Stillwater, Ohio, was split in half. Those who believed the family had simply drowned, and those who whispered that something darker had happened that night. The Bennett family had seemed like the last people to disappear. Richard Bennett, the father, was a foreman at the local mill. A stubborn man with a sharp sense of right and wrong, who wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers in town politics. His wife, Linda, was quieter, a school nurse whom everyone described as gentle but guarded. Their kids, Michael, 16, and Molly, 12, were the type you saw at every school event and church picnic, active, well-liked, never any trouble. On June 24th, 1986, the family's tan station wagon was found parked at their favorite riverside spot. The doors locked and a picnic basket still on the back seat. Their fishing rods were propped up by the water, but there was no sign of Richard, Linda, Michael, or Molly. No footprints, no note, no torn clothing, not even a stray shoe. The local sheriff's office launched a frantic search that stretched from the dense woods along the river to abandoned barns and fields. Bloodhounds sniffed along the muddy banks. Volunteers combed the underbrush, and helicopters swept the area. The only thing they found was silence. As days turned into weeks, then months, rumors began to swirl. Some said Richard had gotten mixed up with the wrong people, maybe angered the wrong folks in town. Others whispered about a family's secret debts, threats, maybe something Linda knew from the school. But the investigation quickly lost steam. The lead detective, Deputy Earl Hodes, filed the missing persons report and insisted every angle had been explored. As months dragged on, the Bennett file was pushed to the back of the cabinet, labeled presumed drowned. The river, it seemed, had claimed another family. But 5 years later, the catfish changed everything. The fisherman, an old-timer named Walt Massey, didn't expect anything unusual when he brought the huge fish home. But as he cleaned it, he found 2 mud-caked rings, one engraved Richard and Linda in 1969. The other a simple band with forever. Ellen Syend, a small, dirt-stained pink hair clip. Massey called the sheriff at once. The news exploded overnight, and suddenly the case was wide open. Deputy Hodes, now promoted to sheriff, couldn't ignore the mounting pressure. Only surviving relative, her estranged sister, Carol, drove in from Cincinnati, demanding answers. A new investigator from the state police was assigned to review the entire case file, determined to find out what had really happened to the Bennetts that summer and whether the clues from the catfish could finally unravel the mystery, as the riverside was sealed off for a new round of searches. One question rang through every home and every diner booth in Stillwater. If the Bennetts were gone, why were their wedding rings and Molly's hair clip inside a fish after all this time? And would the river finally give up the rest of its secrets? Earl Hodes hadn't slept much since Walt Massey brought those rings and the pink clip into the station. The evidence bag sat under a harsh fluorescent lamp, casting long shadows on the wood-paneled walls of his cluttered office. For 5 years he'd convinced himself the Bennetts were lost to the river. Just another tragedy swallowed by Stillwater's muddy current. But now, holding Linda's wedding band in his palm, he felt a cold prickling of guilt that the case had slipped away to Isley. The phone rang every hour. Journalists called from Columbus and Cincinnati hoping for a scoop. Locals gathered at the diner swapping stories about the Bennetts, dredging up old suspicions. Some pointed at the family's neighbors, others at Richard's union disputes, or at rumors about Linda's secretive side. Even Deputy Carla Dean, newly transferred from Akron, sensed the tension as she walked into her first day at the office. "It feels like the whole town's holding its breath," she whispered to Earl as they watched a fresh search party comb the riverbank. Carol Harper, Linda's estranged sister, arrived with red-rimmed eyes and a determination that filled the Sheriff's office. "Don't tell me you're closing this case again," she said, standing stiff-backed in the doorway. "Those rings mean my sister didn't just drown. Someone did this." Earl tried to steady his voice. "We're reopening every angle, ma'am. You have my word." Carla spent her first hours reviewing the original Bennett file. Search logs, maps, witness statements, and Earl's own notes filled 3 thick folders. Oddly, there were inconsistencies she couldn't ignore. A neighbor's statement about a strange car parked near the Bennett's car that afternoon had been dismissed as unreliable. The union foreman mentioned Richard had recently argued with the new mill manager, information buried in a footnote. Linda's last day at the school nurse's office was marked with an asterisk and the word distress, but no further details. As dusk crept across Stillwater, search crews gathered under portable floodlights along the river. This time, they brought in divers to probe the deepest pools and cadaver dogs to sniff the muddy banks. Sheriff Hodes moved among the searchers, but his mind raced with doubt. Had he missed something back then? Was it possible someone in Stillwater, neighbor, a colleague, even a friend, knew more than they'd ever let on? Meanwhile, Walt Massey sat alone in his trailer, watching the evening news replay his stunned face as he held up the wedding rings. He replayed the moment he'd found the jewelry over and over in his mind, convinced it had to mean something bigger. He remembered the catfish fighting harder than any he'd ever hooked, dragging his line far downstream before finally tiring out. He wondered aloud, was that fish trying to keep a secret for 5 years? Back at the sheriff's office, Carla decided to visit the old boat launch before dark. She traced the path the Bennetts would have taken from the parking lot past the willow trees down to the river's edge. Her flashlight beams swept across the weeds and stones, stopping on a faded scrap of cloth half buried in the mud. She crouched down, heart pounding, and saw that it was a torn piece of a child's shirt. Pale blue, with a faded cartoon dog printed on the pocket. When she returned to the station, Earl was still poring over maps. Carla dropped the bagged shirt scrap on his desk. "We're not dealing with a simple drowning," she said, her voice steady. "Someone tried to hide what happened. Someone wanted this family to disappear for good." Outside, the river kept flowing, silent and implacable, as if daring the town to finally face its secrets. And for the first time in 5 years, Sheriff Hodes felt the weight of those secrets settling on his shoulders. Knowing the real story of the Bennetts was just beginning to surface, Deputy Carla Dean barely slept that night, her mind replaying every detail of the evidence bag and the blue scrap of cloth now locked in the property room. The next morning, she returned to the riverbank with a fresh sense of purpose. She combed the area near where she'd found the shirt, this time using a metal detector borrowed from the county fire department. As she swept the device over the muddy ground, it beeped softly. Then, near a cluster of stones, the tone grew urgent. She dug with her hands, feeling the cold, sticky earth until her fingers brushed something metallic. Slowly, she unearthed a small, battered locket caked in mud. She wiped it clean with the hem of her sleeve, revealing a photo inside. A boy and a girl smiling in the late afternoon sun. Michael and Molly Bennett. Carla's heart hammered as she raced back to the station. She laid the locket on the evidence table and snapped a quick photo for the case file, then rushed to show it to Sheriff Hodes. He stared at the picture for a long moment, his face haunted. "That's them," he said quietly, voice cracking. "That's the last photo Linda showed me. She said she took it the day before they disappeared." Word of the new discovery spread quickly through Stillwater. By lunchtime, the station's parking lot was crowded with reporters and curious locals. Some whispered that the Bennetts had been running from someone. Others wondered if the locket meant foul play, not an accident. Sheriff Hodes tried to control the flow of information, but rumors swirled faster than he could contain them. That afternoon, Carol Harper stormed into the station, her face pale and determined. She stared at the locket, then at Carla. That belonged to Molly. Linda gave it to her for her 12th birthday. If you found that here, then someone wanted it to be found. Carla met her gaze, or someone thought it was lost and didn't realize what it meant. At the same time, Michael Bennett's old friend Tommy Harris knocked on the sheriff's door. Tommy was 21 now, all grown up, but still carrying the awkwardness of his teenage years. "I never told anyone," he stammered, glancing at his shoes. But the night they disappeared, I saw a pickup truck parked at the boat launch. It wasn't theirs. Someone was sitting inside, lights off, just watching. Sheriff Hode's eyes narrowed. "You're sure about this, Tommy?" Tommy nodded. "I swear. I didn't think it mattered back then. But I was sneaking out to fish and didn't want to get in trouble." God. Carla scribbled notes as Hodes pressed for more details. Color, make, license plate, anything. Tommy shook his head. It was old, green, and had a big dent on the back fender. "Anyone you know drive a truck like that?" Carla asked. Tommy hesitated. "Maybe Eddie Caldwell. He used to fish down here, but he moved away a year after the Bennetts disappeared." As Tommy left, Carla turned to Hodes. "We have a new lead. Caldwell might have seen something or done something." Hodes nodded, the weight of the years pressing into the lines of his face. "Let's find him." That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Carla and Hodes drove out to Caldwell's old address, a sagging farmhouse at the edge of town. No one had lived there for years but neighbors. Remembered Eddie moving out in a hurry. In the yard, half buried under weeds, Carla spotted a faded fishing lure. She knelt to examine it, realizing it matched the brand the Bennetts always used. The clues were piling up, and with each new piece the story grew darker. Back at the station, Carla pinned the locket, shirt scrap, and fishing lure to the evidence board. "Someone out there knows the truth," she said softly, "and we're getting closer." News of the mounting evidence brought old ghosts out of hiding in Stillwater. For years, Eddie Caldwell's name had only been whispered at the fringes of town gossip, but now his green pickup was at the center of every conversation. Sheriff Hodes and Deputy Carla Dean tracked down Caldwell's last known employer, a lumber yard 2 counties over. After a tense phone call, they learned that Eddie now worked nights at a warehouse outside Dayton. Carla volunteered to drive, the 2 hours herself. "If he knows anything, we need to hear it before the rumors get any wilder," she insisted. Hodes agreed but made her promise to keep him updated by radio. Carla set off into the night, passing through rolling fields. In dark stretches of empty highway, her mind racing through the list of evidence and unanswered questions. Why had Eddie left town so suddenly? What did he see the night the Bennetts vanished? At the warehouse, Carla found Eddie Caldwell unloading crates in the flickering light of a security lamp. He was older and rougher than the yearbook photo she'd found, his hair now graying, hands thick and scarred from years of manual labor. He stared at her badge wearily, then muttered, "I haven't done nothing wrong." Carla assured him she was only after the truth, not a scapegoat. She pulled out the photo of the locket and the fishing lure. "You ever seen these before?" Eddie stared for a long moment before nodding. "Yeah, Molly always wore that locket, and that lure Richard used them all the time." Carla pressed him. "Where were you the night the Bennetts vanished?" Eddie looked away, his voice tight. "Fishing, by myself. I saw some headlights around the village. Near the boat launch. But I left early. Didn't want to get into trouble." "Did you see anyone in the car?" Carla asked. He shook his head. "No, I just saw the car. I heard voices arguing. A man and a woman, but I couldn't make out what they said. I got spooked and drove home." Carla sensed he was holding back something. "Eddie, this is your chance. The town's been looking for answers for 5 years now. If you know something, now's the time to come clean." He hesitated, then sighed. "All right. I saw someone else there." Sheriff Hode's old patrol partner, Bill Tully, was parked down the road, watching. "I thought it was strange he never patrolled that late. Maybe he was just making sure kids didn't get into trouble, but I always wondered about it." In Stillwater, Sheriff Hodes listened to Carla's radio report, his jaw clenched. Bill Tully had retired the year after the Bennetts vanished and moved to Florida, but the detail nagged at him. Tully had always been the golden boy of the department, trusted by everyone. But there had been rumors of shortcuts and quiet favors, done for local bigwigs. "We need to talk to Tully," Hodes said grimly. "But first, we need to find out what really happened in the hours after the Bennetts disappeared." Meanwhile, Carol Harper, Linda's sister, had started her own digging. She visited the old school where Linda had worked, speaking with former colleagues. One colleague, a teacher named Mrs. Rollins, recalled Linda confiding in her about feeling watched and receiving odd phone calls. She was scared, but wouldn't say why, Mrs. Rollins said quietly. She just said some people in town didn't want her asking questions. As Carla pinned these new notes to the growing evidence board, she looked at Hodes. There's more to this than a family vanishing. Someone in Stillwater wanted them, and might still be watching us. Hodes nodded, feeling a chill down his spine. Let's hope we're not too late to find out who it is. The mood in Stillwater grew tenser with each passing day. Flyers with the Bennett's faces reappeared in shop windows. Old rumors resurfaced and new suspicions grew. Sheriff Hodes called a special meeting at the county courthouse, inviting anyone with memories from that summer night to step forward. A handful of locals came, some for the reward, some for closure, and some just for gossip. But it was the arrival of a pale, middle-aged woman named Dorothy Mason that drew the most attention. Dorothy approached Carla quietly after the meeting. "I never told anyone," she whispered, her hands trembling. "But I used to clean the office at the mill. The week before they disappeared, Richard had a heated argument with one of the foremen, Hank Tisdale. It got so loud that I hid in the break room until it was over. Later, I saw Richard slip an envelope into his glove box." Carla jotted down every word. "Did you see what was in the envelope?" Dorothy shook her head. "No, but he looked scared. More scared than I've ever seen him." That night, Carla and Hodes went over to the personnel files at the mill. They found that Hank Tisdale's record was mostly clean, but there were notations about disciplinary issues and suspected skimming from payroll. The connection was circumstantial, but Carla felt a chill. If Richard had discovered embezzlement, that could be a motive. At the same time, Carol Harper wasn't giving up. She tracked down an old friend of Linda's, a former nurse named Nancy Yates, who had moved to Cleveland. Nancy remembered that Linda called her frantic a week before she vanished, and she said she'd found something in a student's file, something she wasn't supposed to see. She was scared, but she wouldn't tell me about what it was. Nancy said. Carla pressed for more details, but Nancy had nothing more to offer. Meanwhile, back at the station, Carla reviewed the evidence board late into the night. She stared at the growing web of clues. The rings, the locket, the torn shirt, the fishing lure. And now, the potential motives like embezzlement at the mill, threats against Linda at school, and Bill Tooley's strange presence on the night of the disappearance. Every time she felt close to a breakthrough, the story seemed too twisted. "Too many secrets in this town," she muttered. The next morning, Sheriff Hodes received a letter postmarked from Florida. It was from Bill Tully. The letter was brief. "I know you're reopening the Bennett case. I have information and can help. Meet me at the old train depot outside Jacksonville alone." Hodes debated for hours, but finally decided he had to go. He called Carla into his office. "I need you to keep digging here, but don't trust anyone except Carol. I don't know who's watching us." As Carla prepared to leave, she was called by Carol. "I need to come to the station," Carla said. "I think someone's trying to stop us from finding the truth." Together, they began to reinterrogate witnesses, focusing on those who had worked with Hank Tisdale and anyone who'd worked with Linda at the school. But what neither of them realized was that someone else was listening. A figure in the shadows outside the sheriff's office, watching their every move. Across town, in a darkened living room, a hand reached for the phone. A gruff voice whispered, "They're getting close. We need to handle this before they find out the real evidence." And in that moment, it became clear that the Bennett story wasn't just about a family lost to the river. It was about a town with too many secrets and people willing to do anything to keep them buried. Sheriff Hodes arrived in Jacksonville after a restless, sleepless bus ride, his mind looping through every lead and every failure from the last 5 years. The old train depot was abandoned, shadowy even in the bright Florida sun. He waited nervously on the cracked platform, glancing at every passing car. At long last, Bill Tully finally stepped into view, older and heavier than Hodes remembered. With eyes that darted everywhere but at his old friend's face, they greeted each other stiffly, the weight of what wasn't said filling the humid air between them. "Why now, Bill?" Hodes demanded. Lee hesitated. Then he thrust a manila envelope into Hodes' hands. "I held on to these. I thought I was protecting you." I was protecting myself too. But now I can't live with it anymore. Inside were old photographs, grainy shots from the night the Bennetts vanished. One showed the family's car at the river, its doors open. Another, blurrier, appeared to show two men arguing near the water. The last was the most shocking. It showed a dark figure dragging something from the bank into a pickup truck, while a small figure, possibly a child, cowered nearby. Hode's stomach dropped. "Who took these photographs?" he asked. Tully's voice shook. "I did, me. I was working a side job surveillance for a private investigator hired by the mill. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I saw everything go bad. I didn't know what to do. I tried to come back later, but it was all gone. I just kept my mouth shut." Back in Stillwater, Carla and Carol pored over school and mill records, looking for names that kept coming up. They saw Hank Tisdale, the nurse Nancy Yates, and now, more and more, Bill Tooley's name. Carla made a list of everyone who had both motive and opportunity. One name, though, leapt off the page: Sheriff Hodes himself. He'd been the lead on the investigation, the one who'd called off the final search. Is it possible he'd deliberately missed something crucial, or worse, deliberately not looked? As they worked, Carla got a call from Walt Massey, the fisherman. "You need to come down here," he said. "There's something else in the river." When Carla arrived, Walt pointed out a battered tackle box tangled in tree roots, exposed by a drop in the water level. Inside were half-rotted lures, but also a wallet with Richard Bennett's initials and a small spiral notebook. The notebook's pages were soaked, but a few lines could be made out. "Tisdale threatened me," it read. "What if," he said. "If I went to the police, no one would ever see my family again." The tackle box discovery reignited suspicion around the mill, and Carla didn't waste no time. She confronted Hank Tisdale at his home. "Where were you the night the Bennetts vanished?" she demanded. Tisdale, sweating and pale, muttered at the bar, "Ask anybody, anyone." But his hands shook and his alibi seemed shaky. Meanwhile, Hodes phoned from Florida, his voice taut. "I have photos. Bill Tully's been hiding evidence for years. I need you to get a warrant for Tisdale's property and, be careful, there's more going on here than you know." As the day ended, Carla pinned the muddy notebook page to the evidence board. Carol watched her and asked quietly, "Do you trust Earl?" Carla hesitated, then answered honestly, "I don't know who to trust anymore. But I'm not stopping until I find out what really happened on that riverbank." In the darkness outside the station, the watcher listened to every word. Knowing the truth was finally inching toward the light, morning broke in Stillwater with brought a cold drizzle that turned the main street to mud and made every face in. Town looked pinched and worried. At the sheriff's office, Carla Dean pressed the district judge for a search warrant, laying out every piece of new evidence: the locket, torn shirt, the tackle box, and the damning note from Richard Bennett. "There's more to this case than anyone realized, Your Honor," she said. "We believe Mr. Tisdale is hiding something on his property." The judge hesitated, then finally relented. "But I want a deputy with you at all times, Dean. No heroic stunts." Carla nodded grimly and grabbed her raincoat, waving Carol Harper along for backup. At Hank Tisdale's rundown farmhouse, two deputies kept Tisdale corralled on the porch as Carla and Carol, gloves on, searched his barn and tool shed. It was a mess: rusted tools, spilled fertilizer, beer cans, moldy life jackets. At first, they found nothing out of place. But then Carol pointed to a patch of freshly disturbed earth under a broken window. Carla knelt, pried up a plank, and uncovered a buried lockbox. Inside, wrapped in oily rags, were several Polaroids. The Bennett children by the river, their faces a mixture of joy and fear. Richard and Hank arguing, fists clenched. At the bottom was a blood-stained handkerchief embroidered with the letter L. Tisdale's face drained of color when Carla confronted him. "Where did these come from, Hank?" He shook his head violently. I found them by the river the day after they disappeared. I was scared. I took them home. Figured I'd get in trouble if I said anything." Carla pressed harder. "So you buried evidence and let the whole town believe the Bennetts drowned?" Tisdale looked down, his voice cracking. "I didn't kill them, I swear." But Richard threatened to expose me at the mill, and Linda came to me the week before, asking about strange men near their house. I told her not to get involved. Carol's voice was ice. You could have helped. You could have told the truth. Meanwhile, word of the warrant and the new evidence spread fast. The town was buzzing. At the mill, workers whispered that Tisdale might finally get what was coming to him. At the school, rumors swirled that Linda's discovery of corruption went higher than anyone thought. At the station, Carla gathered all the evidence and tried to piece together a timeline. The day before the Bennets vanished, Richard argued with Tisdale at the mill. That night, someone, maybe more than one person, watched the family by the river. Suddenly a call came in from a number Carla didn't recognize. The voice on the line was strained, desperate. I know what happened that night, but if I come forward, they'll kill me too. Carla kept her voice calm. Who is this? What do you know? Pause. Then a ragged whisper. Meet me at the old boathouse. Midnight. Come alone. Carla hung up, heart thumping. Unsure if it was a trap or their first real break, she slipped the Polaroids and handkerchief into her jacket, knowing this night could finally bring the truth into the open or bury it for good. As the rain picked up, lightning flashed across the Stillwater River, illuminating the shadow of someone watching from the trees, waiting for midnight to arrive. As midnight approached, Carla Dean parked her cruiser a block from the boathouse and continued on foot, rainwater dripping from her hood. The boathouse, long abandoned, loomed like a black silhouette against the river. She checked her sidearm and pocketed her flashlight, adrenaline sharpening her senses. Inside, the scent of damp wood and river algae clung to the darkness. Her flashlight beams swept over shattered glass, broken oars, and graffiti from years of teenage parties. Then a soft voice called out from behind a stack of canoes. Are you alone? Carla nodded, raising her hands to show she meant no harm. A thin, frightened man stepped into the beam of her flashlight. It was Pete Marlowe, a former mill worker who had vanished from town months after the Bennets. His eyes darted to every shadow. I shouldn't be here, he whispered. But I can't keep running. I saw what happened that night. Carla's voice was low and calm. Tell me everything, Pete. Pete's story spilled out in broken whispers. He'd been camping by the river, hoping to poach a few fish after hours. He saw Richard and Linda arguing with Hank Tisdale and another man, Bill Tully, the former deputy. It got ugly. There was shouting. Tisdale grabbed Richard, shoved him. Kids were crying. Linda tried to stop them. Then Pete described a struggle. Richard R. was struck on the head. Molly screamed, and Bill Tully pulled Linda away from her daughter to a side. Someone pushed Molly. She hit her head on a rock and didn't move again. Pete's voice trembled. I panicked. I ran. When I came back, the family was gone. The riverbank was clean, like nothing had ever happened. Carla pressed. Why didn't you go to anybody at the police? Pete shook his head. I knew too much. I saw Tisdale meeting with Sheriff Tully. Tisdale later that night down by the mill's loading dock. They were arguing and Tisdale gave him a wad of cash. Tully was in on it, told everyone it was an accident, and made sure no one would keep looking. Carla asked, struggling to steady her breathing. She'd always suspected Hodes might be hiding something, but to hear it confirmed was another matter entirely. Where's Linda? Where's Michael? Pete shook his head again. I don't know anything about them. After the fight, but when I came back later, only the blood was left there. I thought they were all dead. But later I heard from a nurse at the hospital that a woman matching Linda's description came in. Badly hurt, asking for help. They said she disappeared the next day after. Carla knew this could be the break they needed desperately. You'll have to testify, Pete. He shook his head in terror. They'll kill me if I do. They're still watching us. Carla touched his shoulder gently but urgently, her grip gentle but firm. Stay hidden. I'll find a way to protect you from them. Outside, a car engine roared in the distance, and headlights swept briefly across the boathouse windows. Pete flinched and shrank back into the shadows. Carla stepped outside, the rain having had stopped, but thunder still rumbled over the river. She looked back at the boathouse, knowing this night had changed everything completely. The conspiracy ran deeper than she'd feared. Feared Hodes, Tisdale, and Tully. They'd buried the truth completely. But now, Carla had witnessed the first crack in the wall of silence had finally appeared. She slipped into her cruiser, her mind racing. Determined to bring the truth into light, no matter who tried to stop her, Carla barely slept that night. Haunted by memories of Pete Marlowe's confession, and piety by the realization that the people she'd trusted the most might be implicated in it. At sunrise the next day, she met Carol Harper at the station. The evidence board was now crowded with Polaroids, maps, and cryptic notes. Carla laid out Pete's testimony, connecting each name to in the growing web of lies Tisdale's. Lies, Tully's, and now, most shockingly, the most shocking of all, Sheriff Earl Hodes. Carol was stunned, asked, "Do you really think Earl was involved in this?" Carla hesitated, then said, "He's always been kind to me, but the pattern fits. If he was paid off to steer the investigation away, it explains why the case went cold, went so fast. We need some proof now." The hospital lead gnawed at Carla's mind constantly. She dug deep through old medical records and finally found something a match. On June 25, 1986, a Jane Doe was admitted with head trauma, consistent with injuries from a struggle, then released the next day after. No address, no ID, but just a nurse's note that said her name was Linda, frantic about her. Children insisted on leaving before the police arrived. It had to be Linda Bennett. Carla called the nurse, now retired and living out of state. The woman remembered Linda clearly, her fear, her refusal to talk to the authorities, and her limp as she staggered away out into the morning. She just kept saying, "They'll find us. Have to go," the nurse recalled. At the same time, Hodes came back from Florida, bags heavy under his eyes and with a deep anxiety in his voice. Carla met with him in his office, careful to keep her distance. She confronted him with everything the Polaroids Tully had taken, Pete's confession, and the hospital record. "You need to tell me everything, Earl," she said. "What did you know about? What did you do about it?" Hodes paled, his hands trembling visibly. "I made some mistakes," he admitted. I thought if we just let things lie, it would be better for everyone involved. Tisdale paid me to look away the other way, just once. I never thought it'd go this far. But after that night it happened. There was no way going back." Carol was furious. "You let my sister and her children vanish? You let their murderers go free?" Hodes looked utterly beaten. "You don't know what it was like, the threats, the secrets involved. Everyone in this town owes someone something." "Errolus." Carla's voice was cold as ice. "You're coming with me now to the sheriff's to make a statement." But as they left the station, a black sedan idled across the street, unnoticed by them. Tully and Tisdale and a second man watched from behind tinted windows. Carla saw them the car and felt her gut twisted. "They're watching us," she whispered. "We have to move now." That night, Pete Marlowe was found badly beaten behind the diner's garage. He was still alive, but in critical condition. Carla sat by at his hospital bedside, holding his hand tightly. "You did the right thing, Pete," she whispered. "I won't let them get away with this." As storm clouds gathered again over Stillwater, Carla realized that every step closer to the truth brought new dangers, but for the first time, this was certain. The wall of silence around the Bennetts was cracking at last. Carla's hands trembled as she drove with Hodes. Tully and Carol toward the county prosecutor's office. Rain hammered at the windshield. Each drop a sharp reminder of the danger now circling around them all around. Hodes sat in the back seat, staring blankly out at the storm-soaked fields, silent and defeated utterly. Carol sat with her fists pressed into her lap, her jaw clenched in a fury that threatened to explode with every mile they passed mile. As they neared the courthouse, the Carla's radio crackled. "All units report of an assault, Pete Marlowe. Critical condition." Her stomach dropped again. "It went after Pete," she muttered, shooting Hodes a sharp glare in the mirror. "Your friends are cleaning up their loose ends now." Hodes' face twisted with guilt. "I never wanted any of this," he said. "I thought if I kept my mouth shut up, nobody else would get hurt." Carla snapped back. That's how people like Tisdale and Tully win. You're going to testify. Now, and I'll keep you safe, but you've got to be completely honest from here on out now. At the prosecutor's office, Assistant DA Donna Monroe listened intently as Carla recounted everything: the account, bribes, the missing Bennetts, disappearance, the new witness now in the hospital bed, and the confession from Stillwater's own Sheriff Hodes himself. Monroe was decisive quickly. We'll move on Tisdale tonight. No leaks, no half measures. Carla, you're deputized as lead investigator until we appoint an interim sheriff. We'll need warrants, protection for your witnesses, and I want you two stay armed at all times. Back at the hospital, Carla visited Pete's room again. His face was battered purple, his breathing ragged still. She knelt beside his bed and whispered, "Hang on, Pete. We're taking them down." Opened. His eyes, struggling to speak. Check. The old freezer.
Yes.
Basement Tisdale's barn.
Proof. There.
Then he slipped back into unconsciousness again. Carla called Carol and Monroe immediately, outlining a plan quickly. 2 deputies would protect Carol at a safe house, while Carla, with backup from the county police, had hit Tisdale's property before dawn. The storm showed no sign of letting up as she pulled into Tisdale's farm, pulled up with 2 marked cruisers right behind her. Flashlights cut through the rain as they moved in, shouting for Tisdale to show himself up. They found him inside in the kitchen, pale and sweating heavily, surrounded by empty whiskey bottles all around. "Tisdale, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and suspicion of murder," Carla declared firmly, snapping cuffs onto his wrists tightly, spat at her boots angrily, but didn't resist further. The searchers' team headed straight for the barn. They pulled up floorboards and pried open tool chests. But nothing seemed out of place until one deputy shone their flashlight behind a rusted old freezer, wedged against the far wall tightly. Carla and the deputy muscled the freezer aside, out, revealing a hidden cache inside. Wrapped in garbage bags and sealed with tape were stacks of water-damaged papers parole sheets, bribe ledgers, payroll records, and, most damning of all, Polaroids of bruised faces and cryptic notes written in Tisdale's scrawl handwriting. "Keep them quiet. If she talks, they all go down." Carla's chest tightened as she flipped through pages of the documents here. Here was the evidence, not just proof of Tisdale's crimes, but of an entire criminal network: names, payoffs, names of payoffs even. Side notes about the nurses and the sheriff's involvement. Tully, she found a letter addressed to L, written in Linda Bennett's careful, neat handwriting. "If anything happens to us, it was not an accident. Tell my Michael to run away." As dawn broke over, Tisdale was hauled away in cuffs, protesting. Carla handed over the evidence to Monroe, her fingers numb from the cold and adrenaline rush. "It's all here," she said. "The whole story is here." But as she drove back to her place, she knew there were still pieces missing: Linda's fate, Michael's whereabouts, and the full truth about what happened that night. The Bennett's family was swallowed up by the river swallowed. Them daylight returned to Stillwater under a heavy, bruised sky. With a flurry of police activity buzzing around the courthouse steps, Hank Tisdale, now handcuffed and his face drained of all defiance completely, was led through the lobby, past a crowd of onlookers and news crews clamoring. Reporters shouted their questions at him, but Tisdale kept his gaze fixed downward on the floor. Inside the courthouse, Assistant DA Monroe reviewed the files. Carla had delivered the photographs, ledgers, payrolls, letters, and began assembling a formal case for indictment against Tisdale and others. Meanwhile, Carla barely paused to rest. She re-examined the letter Linda wrote to her, noticing something odd and strange: a faint smudge beneath the ink, as if Linda had started a different note and then changed her mind and wrote over it later. Carla held the smudged paper up to the pale morning light, revealing faint words beneath. "We're not alone here. He said he'll come for us, Michael." What? Her pulse raced. Could it be possible that Michael had survived that night after all? With Tisdale now in custody and the evidence mounting up, Carla returned to the sheriff's safe house to update Carol about the letter and its hidden message. Carol's tear-filled eyes brimmed with tears. She must have had known. She said softly, "Maybe Linda found some way to protect her son, maybe Michael. Maybe he got away." Determined to follow this new lead through, Carla traced every mention of Michael Bennett's name in town records, hospitals, and missing persons reports from 1985, 1986 to 1990, 1991. In a small rural clinic 2 counties south away, she found a possible matcha teenage boy admitted under the name Mick Lane. Treated for minor injuries 5 years earlier, the summer after the incident, Bennett's vanished. His admission. Forms listed had no family listed, but a nurse's note read, "Quiet, scared, afraid, ran away after one night." Carla drove to the clinic immediately, showing photos of Michael Bennett around to the aging staff there. One nurse, Mrs. Everett, remembered that the boy, clearly Lee, he was scared, he terrified, wouldn't say who he was running away from. He asked about his mother, but he wouldn't give her name out. The next morning after, he was gone. Backett and Stillwater, Monroe's legal team interrogated Tisdale further. At first, he stonewalled them. But when confronted with the evidence, especially Linda's letter and Pete's testimony, his composure broke, crumbled entirely. It wasn't supposed to go that far. Tisdale muttered, We just wanted to scare Richard off, make him shut up about the mill. Tully was the one who hit him. I didn't know Linda or the kids would get caught up in it." After the fight, everyone panicked. Completely Hades said to clean up the scene. "Call it an accident and let the river hide everything. Rest." Monroe pressed him further, "And Michael, where is he now?" Tisdale stared at his hands, his voice barely audible, a whisper. "I don't know anything. He ran away. We never could find him." With this confession, the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. Richard was murdered. Linda was wounded and on the run, Michael missing, and Molly presumed dead. Carla called Monroe and said, "We have to find Michael now. He may still be out there, and if he is, someone might want to silence him for good." That evening, Carla returned to the Riverbank River, standing at the exact spot where the Bennett's picnic basket was found years ago. She pictured that night, chaos of that night, shouts, violence, shouting, a young boy running through the trees, terrified. As the river flowed on, relentless and cold, she made a promise to herself, a promise. She would not stop until she'd found Michael, no matter how many lies she had to unearth to do it. Somewhere far away, in a distant, anonymous motel room. Far away, a young man in his early 20s read a newspaper headline about Tisdale's arrest, his hands trembling visibly as he traced the name Bennett. He closed his eyes tightly, memories flooding back, and whispered softly, "It's finally happening now." The search for Michael Bennett became the driving force behind Stillwater's police department's efforts. Carla worked day and night, tirelessly, her desk buried deep under piles of files. Witness statements, hospital and hospital admissions from all over Ohio. She put out a press release with an age-progressed image of Michael. To come forward? The phone lines lit up quickly, false leads, prank calls, but also a handful of genuine possibilities came through. Carol Harper pitched in with outreach efforts, appearing on local news programs and pleading to people. "If you're out there, Michael, we want you back home," she pleaded on camera, her voice breaking with emotion. Within a few days, a call came in from a woman in Kentucky. "I think your nephew might have rented a room here last month," she said, describing a quiet young man who paid in cash, wore a faded ball cap, and kept to himself mostly. Heidi asked if she knew where the Stillwater River was. Carla and Carol drove to Kentucky immediately, stopping at the roadside motel the woman had described. The owner handed over a forgotten sketchbook left behind. Inside were page after page of drawings, rivers, of forests, rivers, and a single family sitting together by a water's edge. On the back cover, in small blocky letters, were written the words, "Don't forget who you are. Don't forget Stillwater." Heart leapt. She knew he was alive, and he remembers. "He's alive," she said. "He remembers everything." Meanwhile, Assistant DA Monroe's team pressed Bill Tully now, who had been extradited back from Florida, through a series of grueling interrogations. At first, Tully insisted that he hadn't killed anyone, but when shown The photos of the crime scene and Tisdale's confession, he'd finally cracked completely. Richard was going to go to the feds, Tully admitted. The mill was rotten all the way up the chain, rotten with bribes, embezzlement, bribes, payoffs, to police everything. I was just supposed to scare him off that was the plan. But things got out of hand completely, Tisdale. Tully hit him. Molly got hurt trying to protect her dad's father. Linda tried to run away, but she got knocked out. Michael, he ran away. I swear I thought he drowned. I swear it. Tully's admission was the missing piece, missing. Monroe authorized Carla to release the story to the press, the media. Michael Bennett survived. If anyone knew where he was, his whereabouts, they were to contact the authorities immediately. That night, as the news broke across the region widely, Carla's office phone rang suddenly. The voice on the line was trembling, almost inaudible. I think I'm Michael. I'm tired of running away. Within hours, Carla and Carol were on the road again, heading straight to a shelter in Louisville, Kentucky. There, in a quiet, private interview room, they met a young man with haunted eyes and Linda's familiar chin. Tears streamed down Carol's face as she embraced him tightly, saying, "You're safe now, it is over." Michael told his story in halting bursts, how he'd escaped through the woods, found temporary help from a stranger who let him stay in an abandoned cabin, and survived by hiding out, working odd jobs, never staying in one place for too long. "I watched from the shadows," he said, "as they took my mother away in an ambulance, but I couldn't get to her. I saw Tisdale and Tully, they were searching for MSO, so I disappeared for good." Carla gently told him that his mother Linda had also survived for a time, but vanished after leaving the hospital soon after.
We're still searching.
"Looking for her," she assured him. "But your being here means everything to us." As Michael signed his official statement, Carla realized that the puzzle was almost complete, but the most heartbreaking mystery still remained. What had happened to Linda Bennett? And would the final truth, when it finally emerged, set any of them free at last? For the first time in years, a flicker of hope flickered in Carol Harper's eyes as she sat right beside Michael in the Louisville shelter. Carla watched their reunion, letting herself believe for a moment that justice and healing might finally be possible, at least for them. But the question of what happened to Linda Bennett, her fate, her whereabouts, still haunted everyone, involved deeply. Michael's memories were scattered and clouded by fear and trauma. "After I ran," he recounted softly, "I hid out in the woods until it was dark out. I heard men shouting, Tisdale, yelling. I think Tisdale and another man I didn't know then. They were looking for me everywhere. I couldn't stop. I kept running away." He paused. "I thought I'd never see my mother again after." Carla asked gently, "Did you ever see your mother again after that night?" Michael shook his head slowly. "No, I waited nearby the hospital for her, but she never came out. I didn't see her. I thought they'd gotten her too." Carla pressed further. "Did your mother say anything to you that on the night it happened?" Michael's face furrowed in thought. "She hugged me tightly and said, 'If we're ever separated, don't trust anybody, anyone, in uniform, except for Lindick, except for Carol. Find out Hirsch, believe you.'" Carol squeezed his trembling hand tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks freely now. "You did the right thing, Michael," she said. With Michael's permission granted, Carla arranged for a forensic composite sketch artist to work with him too, reconstructing the faces and scenes moments from that awful night. Resulting sketch of Tisdale matched his mugshot perfectly. The other man, Michael recalled, he identified as Tully. He was wearing a deputy's badge. "It was him," Michael said, "Bill Tully." "But there was someone else there that night," Michael added, his voice trembling with a tremor. "A woman, she was crying and sobbing. She was with my mom, I think. I think she might have helped her get away somehow." Carla's mind raced immediately. Could Linda have been helped by had an ally? Perhaps someone from the hospital staff or someone else in town who'd helped her escape. She tracked down every nurse and orderly who was on duty that fateful night, piecing together their statements, witness statements, and time cards meticulously. Finally, she found a breakthrough one. One nurse, Patricia Long, who had left town. Abruptly, just days after Linda's disappearance, vanished, vanished. No forwarding address was left. But there were rumors she'd moved away to Missouri somewhere far, while Carla prepared to pursue this new lead. The DA's office back home moved forward swiftly. Monroe filed formal charges against Tisdale Tully and Sheriff Hodes for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, obstructing, assault, and accessory to murder. The residents of Stillwater watched in stunned shock as three men, once thought untouchable, were paraded through the courthouse steps in cuffs, their crimes exposed. News crews descended upon flooded the town's streets, and while some locals blamed the Bennett's victims for stirring up trouble, others began holding candlelight vigils along the riverbank, praying for Linda's soul and honoring the memory of Richard and Tisdale. For the first time ever, the Bennett story felt real to Stillwater, a real tragedy, born not of nature's wrath but of human cruelty and cowardice combined. As Carla packed her bags to head for Missouri, Michael pulled her aside quietly and said, "If you do find my mom, please tell her I never stopped looking for her everywhere." Carla promised him, "I will find her, no matter what it takes to do." The trip to Missouri felt like the final leg of a long marathon for Carla Dean's investigation. With every mile she drove, she replayed Patricia Long's name and the fragments of clues linking her to Linda's possible escape. Arriving in a quiet, sun-baked small town on the outskirts of St. Louis, Missouri, Carla found Patricia tending to a flower stall at the local marketer. Her hair was now streaked with gray, her eyes sharp but weary from years gone by. Carla introduced herself calmly, explaining that she wasn't there to cause any trouble, but only to uncover what had happened to Linda Bennett. All those years ago, Patricia's guard softened, dropped at the mention of Linda's name. "I remember her every single day," she whispered, her voice trembling over a cup of sweet tea in the back of her small flower shop. Patricia shared her story slowly. Linda came into the ER just before sunrise. She was bleeding. Terrified, bleeding, and begging me not to call the cops. She said, "Please, they'll find me. They'll find my son if I stay." You can't trust anyone from Stillwater. I couldn't let her go like that, so I hid her in the supply closet until I clocked out my shift. When the shift changed over, I snuck her out the back door, gave her some cash and some food, and put her on a bus headed to Kansas City. I never saw her again after, but every Christmas since then, I've received a card, no card. Number, address, just a simple thank you for saving me. Patricia choked back her tears as she spoke. I always hoped she'd found some peace somewhere. Carla's heart lifted at this. Linda had survived at least for some time, and she'd been free for a while. Patricia handed over a small box containing all the cards Linda had sent her over the years, each one dated a year apart. After the most recent one was just 3 months old, postmarked from a small little town in Nebraska. "That's the only clue I ever had," Patricia said softly. She always said she was fine, but I could tell from her words she was still running, still scared. Carla called Carol and Michael immediately with the news.
"Oh, she's alive!"
Michael's voice cracked with emotion. Carol answered for them both, her tone a mix of hope and aching disbelief. "We have to find her now. We have to." Meanwhile, back in Stillwater, Assistant DA Monroe pressed forward with the ongoing trial against Tisdale, Tully, and Hodes. Their testimonies from Pete Marlowe, who had recovered enough to appear via video, and Michael's own harrowing account destroyed what little remained of their defense completely. It became painfully clear that the Bennett's tragedy had its roots in greed. Betrayal, greed, and a town's willingness to turn a blind eye to corruption for too long. With the cards as her only guide now, Carla traced Linda's long journey bus tickets. Odd jobs, brief stays at women's shelters across from Missouri to Iowa, then to Nebraska. She found people along the way who remembered a kind but haunted woman, a woman who never stayed long anywhere, always looked over her shoulder nervously, and who never let anyone get too close to her. But in every place she'd been, Linda had left behind kindness in her wake, before vanishing, before disappearing again, before trouble could catch up, find her finally. Carla arrived in a small town in Nebraska, standing on a sun-drenched street. Outside a modest little trailer home, she knocked softly on the door. The door opened slowly and cautiously, and there, older, thinner, but unmistakably Linda Bennett, stood the woman Stillwater had long thought lost forever. Recognition flickered in Linda's weary, tired eyes as she asked, "Are you here to bring me home, or are you here to take me in?" Carla answered gently. "I'm here to bring you peace, Linda. Your son is alive, Michael's alive. Your sister's waiting for you, too, Carol, and the men who destroyed your life are finally behind bars now." For the first time in 5 long years, Linda let herself cry openly. "I never thought this day would ever come," she whispered softly, back in Stillwater. As Michael and Carol prepared for a long drive west to reunite with Linda, it felt for the first time as though, if the river's dark curse might finally be broken at last. Linda Bennett stood frozen in the doorway of her trailer, tears glistening on her cheeks as Carla gently explained everything: how Michael had survived against all odds, how he'd never stopped searching for her, and how Carol had fought tirelessly every day to bring their family back together again. Carla reached into her satchel and handed Linda the small box of cards she'd sent to Patricia long over all those years. "These kept hope alive for you and for everyone who loved you," Carla said. With trembling hands, Linda opened the box and traced her own familiar handwriting. "I tried to keep moving always," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought if I stayed away, maybe the people who hurt us would leave my son alone at least." Her voice broke again. "Every single day I thought of Michael and Molly. I hoped somehow that Carol might know the truth about us." Carla nodded understandingly. "Michael's waiting for you back in Stillwater, Carol, too. The case is over now, Linda. The men who destroyed your family can't hurt you anymore." Linda stared out at the Nebraska sunlight, her face a mixture of relief and lingering terror. "I want to go home," she said. "But what will I find there when I get back?" "You'll find your son in a town that finally knows the truth about everything," Carla replied softly. A day later, Carol and Michael arrived in Nebraska, their rented sedan rolling up slowly to the quiet trailer park. Michael stepped out first, his hands shaking visibly. Linda stared at him for a long moment, searching for the boy she'd lost, seeing the man who now stood before her. Then, with a sob, she rushed forward, and Michael caught her in his arms tightly, both of them trembling, laughing, and weeping all at once together. Carol joined them soon, forming a silent, grateful circle as curious neighbors watched from their windows nearby. Sensing something momentous unfolding, Carla stood off to the side, her heart swelling as she witnessed the reunion she'd worked so hard to make possible happen. Inside the trailer, they talked for hours about that fateful night by the river, about the years lost forever, about Molly and Richard, and about all the dreams that had washed away in the river's current. Linda described her long journey, the constant running, the terror that kept her awake in every new town she fled to. Michael shared how he'd survived, always clinging to hope that his mother would find him someday. That night, as dusk settled gently over Nebraska, Carla prepared to drive the reunited family back to Stillwater. Before they left, Linda took Carla's hands in hers tightly and said, "You gave us our lives back," she whispered. "You never gave up on us, even when everyone else had." Carla smiled warmly, but her thoughts drifted to Molly and Richard too, the pieces of the Bennett family that could never be restored. She promised herself silently that their memories would not be forgotten. That and their story would change Stillwater for the better forever. As they drove into the night together, a sense of peace settled over Linda, Michael, and Carol for the first time in many years. The worst was finally over. Justice had been served, and the family was whole again, if forever changed forever. But as their headlights carved through the darkness ahead, Carla knew that for some in Stillwater, the true reckoning had only just begun. Word of the Bennetts. Reunions spread through Stillwater faster than any secret ever had before. By the time Carla's car pulled up to Carol's modest home house, neighbors lined the sidewalk outside, some clutching homemade casseroles, others holding up signs that simply read, "Welcome home." Linda, Michael, and Carol stepped out. To warm applause and teary embraces from the crowd, Inside Carol's home, the mood was bittersweet. Photos of Richard and Molly, carefully framed and dusted, stood proudly on the mantel. Michael sat on the old familiar couch, tracing his father's army medal with trembling fingers. "I wish Dad could see this now," he murmured softly. Linda wrapped an arm around his shoulders tightly, her own eyes shining with tears. "He'd be so proud of you, of all of us," she said. That evening, Carla joined the family for a quiet dinner together. Her conversations circled back to old-times fishing trips, birthday parties, and inside jokes that had somehow survived the long years apart. But the shadow of their loss lingered always. Carol raised a toast to Molly and Richard, her voice trembling but clear. Their story will never be forgotten, and what was done to them will never happen to anyone else in this town again. Meanwhile, the Stillwater courthouse buzzed was a hive of activity. Dom Monroe's case against Tisdale, Tully, and Hodes made statewide news headlines. Testimonies from Pete Marlowe, who had recovered enough to appear via video, and Michael's own harrowing account painted a vivid picture of systemic corruption, betrayal, corruption, and the high cost of silence in Stillwater. The jury returned swift guilty verdicts, life sentences for Tisdale and Tully, and decades behind bars for Hodes on charges of obstruction and conspiracy charges. As reporters crowded outside the courthouse steps, Carla made a brief public statement. "This isn't just about one family, it's about the importance of truth, no matter how long it takes to find or how hard it is to uncover. The Bennetts deserved justice. Stillwater deserved the truth about them." In the weeks that followed, old wounds in Stillwater slowly began to heal at last. Linda started volunteering at the local library. Michael enrolled at the local community college, determined to study law enforcement and help others lost in the system like he had been. Carol, for the first time in years, allowed herself to plan for a future rather than mourn the past endlessly. On the riverbank where it had all began, a new memorial bench was installed, bearing a simple brass plaque that read, "In memory of Richard and Molly Bennett loved. Missed, never forgotten." Linda visited the bench often, sometimes with Michael, sometimes alone, always leaving a single wildflower on the bench and pausing to watch the river's steady, relentless flow. One crisp autumn afternoon, Linda stood by the water's edge, the sun setting in a blaze of gold and red. She closed her eyes, breathed in the cool, fresh air, and let go of a burden she'd carried for far too long. At her side, Michael squeezed her hand gently. "We made it, Mom," he said softly. "We're really home now." For the first time ever, Linda allowed herself to believe it truly. A gentle winter snow dusted Stillwater on the morning Linda Bennett stood on the steps of the county courthouse. Michael and Carol right at her side, reporters clustered nearby, hoping for a quote, but Linda offered only a grateful nod to them. The past months had brought painful revelations, but also hard-won peace at last. For the first time in many years, she felt neither hunted nor haunted anymore. Inside the courthouse, Assistant D.A. Monroe shook Linda's hand warmly, congratulating her on the strength it had taken her to survive and testify in court. "Because of you, more families will trust that the truth matters," Monroe said sincerely. Linda thanked her softly. And Michael, now officially enrolled in the local college's criminal justice programs, smiled with quiet pride as the Bennetts left the courthouse together. Neighbors and friends lined the sidewalk outside, offering hugs and warm applause. Pete Marlowe, finally out of the hospital at last, embraced Michael tightly. "You saved us all, kid," he said warmly. Michael smiled back, humbled by the long journey that had led him home at last. That weekend, Stillwater hosted a candlelight vigil on the riverbank in memory of Richard and Molly. The community gathered under a sky full of twinkling stars, each person lighting a candle and sharing stories about the Bennetts. Linda spoke briefly, her voice trembling but clear. "We were lost, but we found our way back, not just because of the truth, but because of everyone who never stopped believing in us." Carla Dean, standing beside the family, felt a deep sense of closure at last. She'd solved the case, brought corrupt men to justice, and helped mend a family torn apart by violence and betrayal. Yet she knew her work wasn't finished entirely. The river held other secrets still. Stillwater would always need people willing to stand up for what was right, As days turned into weeks, the rhythms of life returned to Stillwater. Linda found a steady job at the library. Carol joined the local town council, and Michael, his past now public by, became a voice for the missing and the lost everywhere. The bench by the river became a quiet symbol of resilience, a place for anyone who had suffered loss to find comfort and hope again. In one final, quiet moment, Linda, Michael, and Carol sat together on that bench by the river. Michael traced the plaque's words with his fingers gently. "I think they'd be proud of us," he said softly. Linda nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "We survived. We're home, and no one will ever silence us again." As dusk fell gently over Stillwater, the river flowed on, no longer a boundary, but a thread connecting past and present, loss and healing, silence and truth.